Hi there, friends, and welcome to another batch of the 10 Handmade Cards 1 Homemade Kit in April. And we're just going to dive right into card number 6. So, in the first 5 cards, I really focused on the flowers. This time around, I'm going to focus on the other products that I had pulled out for this kit. So, in this one, I'm going to work with the Hello shaker die that I had pulled out, and I had punched or I had die cut that in various pattern papers and also cardstock. And initially in my mind, I wanted to cut the hello on a few of them and then use that frame, that scallop frame, as kind of a picture frame. Fill that in with some pattern paper on the backside, and then use that to decorate the card. And then I also die cut this piece using my adhesive backed cardstock, and so it just made this thing go really fast. And at first I liked the pink, but really the orange on the pink, just the orange didn't really stand out because of it being kind of in the same darker tone. And so I'm going to change it up a bit and actually use this lighter blue diagonal, and that makes that hello stand out much better. Now I am going to adhere this frame onto the orange cardstock, and because it's so skinny that I decided to use my spray adhesive for that. I have this Aleene's tacky spray and I love it. I've had this for years, actually more than maybe like 5 years, and the same bottle. But I really like that one, so that's what I'm going to be using there. And then because this is just like a pattern galore type of card, I am using another dot of yellow this time, and that's going to be my base. Now I am going to adhere that framed orange piece of paper twice, and I'm just going to use the same one. Basically what I'm going to do is I am going to kind of make that go on the edge and then trim it, and then move that same piece, the leftover of that piece, onto a different part of the layout. So you can totally do this if you have scrap pieces of paper, and if you're mass producing the same design, because as you can see, you're only needing 2 pieces of that block of paper, but you're creating 3 different rectangles or pieces, I should say. So that's, now that I've done that, that's just a fairly easy design. And then I'm going to be putting that on a piece of the card base, and then I'm going to decorate that with a few different things as well. So that hello that you see that I've cut, you can also keep that and then use that as a sentiment for a different card. So there's lots of different ways that you can maximize your supplies when it comes to this kind of design, and without a lot of work. I mean, you die cut the pieces once and you use them a few times on different cards, and I think that's a great way to be efficient with the card making. So I just inked up the edges a little bit just to make it stand out, and I'm going to adhere that on the craft cardstock. I feel like the yellow will stand out really well with the darker craft cardstock. Now I am figuring out what I will put into this. Initially, when I kind of was sketching the design for this card, I thought that I would put a blank, not a blank, but like, a plain paper on the backside of those frames, and then just fill it in with flowers. But I really wanted to use the pattern papers that I pulled out. And this is my die cut book. If you have not seen this, I showed it last month, and just kind of in a share video of how I put it together and what adhesive I use so that I can easily pull it out. But I love this because then I could see my little die cut pieces better, instead of kind of rummaging through a box or a container for them. And I'm pulling out, because this is a kind of fairly simple card, and because we are in April, I wanted to add flowers to it. And so I was just pulling out, I was auditioning some flowers just to kind of see. The potted flowers look nice too, but I felt like there wasn't really a good place for me to have that there. And so I'm just kind of going through some die cut pieces here. I know you don't see the whole space of it or the whole book, but I will make sure that I leave the link to the video in the description box below, so that if you wanted to see that in more detail, that you'll be able to do that. Now, in my mind, I was going to put the flowers in the different frames so that it will create a visual triangle, but then at the end I just decided to put them kind of around my sentiment, just to make the sentiment stand out a little bit more. I will add this one flower with some fun foam just to make it stand out against that flower that is right next to it, and then I'm adding some fun foam to the top flower as well. And then I'm just going to dress that up a little bit more, add a finishing touch of enamel dots, and call it good. So that's going to be my card number 6. And if you have not seen the videos that I shared prior to this, make sure that you check that out in my channel. It should be the posts right before this. I break down these 10 handmade cards into 3 videos. I always do, for my first video, I always share the products that I plan on using, and so it's kind of a more introduction product share. And then the next video is my first batch of handmade cards. So I had my first 5 cards and the process videos that went with it, and then this is the last or second process video, which shares my number 6 to 10 cards, and then also kind of what's left over. And I actually have a bonus at the end of this video. I'm going to share with you a bunch of other cards that I was able to create with this kit that I put together. It was really interesting because I didn't realize that this pattern paper would inspire me to create so many cards. You would be surprised how many cards that I created with this particular kit, but I am going to talk about that more at the end of this video, so make sure that you stay tuned. So we are now on card number 7, and again, I'm using those frames because I really love the scallop look of it, and also because the pattern paper lends itself really well to mix it up to get all together, because the designs of the pattern papers are small, so they don't compete with one another. You just get this punch of color, but you don't get a two kind of crazy design mixed together. As you can see, there's like tiny flowers, tiny dots, and I really love this pattern paper. It just works really well. Again, I'm using my Aleene's tacky spray glue to glue those frames, and as you can see, I have a lot of these frames left over, and I'm just going to set that aside because I will be using that for another card. Now, initially, I was thinking of maybe backing up those frames on the edges as I did with card number 6, but I also wanted to show that the dots of the background piece, so I just decided to leave it alone. But I will dress that up a little bit with some enamel dots on the edges, and then I also felt like the centerpiece was missing a few things, so I'm going to be finding some things to add to that. But right now, I'm going to add some enamel dots. So this time I went with a little bigger one. A, because I was running out of the small ones, and B, because I feel like that space warranted a larger enamel dot, because it is kind of a big space. Now, I'm auditioning again. I said that hello just kind of felt like it was missing something, and so I'm going to add a strip of sentiment that would go with that. And I would go with the You Make Me Laugh and Smile. And that was just heat embossed with black embossing powder on white cardstock. And then I also pulled out some butterflies for the top and the bottom. And I didn't plan this, but it just so happened that those butterflies matched the colors of my cardstock and the yellow pattern paper on the background. So that was a really nice surprise, and that just tickled me because I didn't really plan that. But I guess it just shows you that if you have enough, if you've saved up enough stash, that you will eventually find items in your stash that would match each other, even though you didn't plan on that when you initially bought those or put them together. So that is card number 7. And I'm just showing you some close up of that. Now we go on to card number 8. Now, this one I have to say was one of my favorites from this set. I really like that background. That background looks simple, but it's actually layered stamping. And so that took a little while of creating because you have to stamp the background piece or the bottom piece, and then you kind of build it up. And so as you can see, there's 2 layers for each of my flowers. You have the lighter pink and then the darker pink for the details, and then the leaves, the same thing, and the blue flowers and the yellow kind of starburst flower. They're all kind of that layered look. So there's all of them have 2 pieces to, or 2 stamp pieces to each of those flowers. So again, they don't look very detailed, but they took a while to stamp. Now, this Hello Shaker is really meant for a shaker card, and so that's what I'm doing here. But because the image is so intricate, that what I did was just basically I just die cut that piece many times with the self-adhesive cardstock. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I layered at least 6 or 7 of them here before I adhered my pattern paper piece, because I will add a pattern paper piece to this. But just to make it thick, and I used a white cardstock as my background piece, or that that bottom piece where the shaker pieces or the sequins will go. And then I'm just going to adhere. The thing about shaker is that you want the piece to be enclosed so that the sequins won't come out. So if I used glue dots with this, there's going to be parts of that frame that will be open that the sequins could possibly come out of. So I'm just using my ATG gun for that and running adhesive all around that to make sure that there's no opening for the shaker to come out. And then I am going to spray some adhesive onto my pattern Hello frame, and then putting that right on top of the acetate piece that I had cut out to cover that sequence. And again, I really love how this turned out. It took a while, of course, especially with die cutting all of those hello pieces, but I thought that they turned out really well. And another tip that I could share with you is, if because you are just layering that hello piece, you can also just use papers that you don't care about, or scrap pieces, because you're not going to see the color of those specific pieces of paper. They're just to build bulk to your die cut piece. So that's another thing that you might want to consider. And at first, I just wanted to put that pattern paper right on top of a craft cardstock, but then I decided that it just doesn't it wasn't popping up right. And so I went with a white cardstock, but white on white was just, for me, just felt like it would blend easily with one another. And so I decided to get a green pattern paper in between that, and then that's what I will do. And because the white piece of the shaker was self-adhesive, I just peeled that off and didn't have to add any other adhesive to that. And I loved how this turned out. Now, you could also add a sentiment strip on the bottom of the hello piece, but I just decided to leave it like that. I felt like it was just simple. Let me know in the comment section below. If you were doing that card, would you have added a sentiment strip on the bottom of the hello, or would you have left that as is like I did? So now I'm going to go back to a flower card because I remembered that a I had stamped a flower that I wanted to hand cut. And so I cut that out, and then I cut out another of the hello frame because I just wanted that black and white diagonal frame. And then I am layering pattern papers on with this one. And so basically, I'm going to turn that flower into or not flower, but I'm going to turn the frame into a diagonal piece so I can tuck in that flower in the center. And I loved how that turned out. And at first I was thinking, well, I didn't really want to cover that flower because it's so pretty. Oh, I also misted some glimmer spray on top of that just to kind of give it a little bit of shine. But then I'm still thinking about it because I really didn't want to cover that flower, and I was kind of figuring out maybe I could cut a sentiment and put that on the top and the bottom, but you'll see what I end up doing after I ink up the edges of this. I'm just using a distress ink pad, and I'm using a tea dye ink. That's kind of like my go-to ink. That specific ink pad and the blender just sits or rests on the side of my mat so that I can use that for both card making and scrapbooking as well. And I like to kind of adhere or add my adhesive on the backs of my panels because that's part of my kind of efficient way of card making, is that I cut everything at once, I adhere everything at once, I add adhesive at once, and all that good stuff. I think I stopped there because my husband was talking to me about something, and so I just kind of had a little pause there. So now I am figuring out what kind of adhesive I'm going to use. And since this one is not a shaker, I just wanted to add the frame. I just decided to add a mini glue dot on all four corners of it and then add that to my piece. Now, if you're a little bit more OCD, then you can use a ruler to make sure that it's aligned from top to bottom, because I'm looking at it now and there's a lot more space on the bottom, but I don't really care. It's all good. And so now I'm going to be adhering this piece on top of that, or centering it on the frame, and I will be adding some fun foam to that just because I feel like that needs to stand out a little bit more on the card. If you have any questions about any of my cards, make sure that you leave them in the comment section below, and I will try to answer it as fast as I can. I know that I sometimes don't get to the comments soon enough, but know that I read them. I appreciate all of the comments. Whenever I get to sit down and read the comments, it just makes my day, because I appreciate that you guys watch the videos that I do, and that you actually get something out of the projects that I create. So I really do appreciate that. And yeah, again, if you have any questions as far as products or techniques or whatever, just make sure that you leave that in the comment section below. So I went with this sentiment that says, "You make me smile for no reason." And I'm going to go with that as far as my sentiment. And I'm just going to place that right smack in the middle of the flower. Again, I kind of debated. I didn't want to cover that flower, but it's a little piece and you can still see most of the flower on the background, and so I'm just going to go with that. Now, I don't have a lot of the small dots anymore, but I will be using a few of them here. I believe I would use some of them in the corners. Now, the problem that I have with that is that I only have the 3 pinks. I don't have any other of the smaller pink one. And so I felt like, well, if I have three pinks and another smaller one of a different color, that's not going to look good. And so I was kind of rummaging through my stash and found a lone single pink enamel dot. Now, it's not quite the same color as the other pinks, but I was still pretty tickled that I found one that's kind of similar in color to it. Again, it just shows you that if you have a lot of products, that you will eventually find ones that work with each other. Okay, now we go on to my 10th card, and this is the last card for my 10 handmade cards, one homemade kit. Well, I lied. Actually, it's not my last card, but I will show you. This is going to be like the last process, or the card that you will see the process video of. Okay, so now with this one, again, I hand cut the flower. I could have just not used this one, but because you've already seen me create a card with a hand cut flower. However, I feel like I spend a lot of time coloring these things, so might as well cut them out. And so that's what I'm doing here. I will also be using some pattern papers, and that cutout, or the excess of the frames that I used for, I believe it was card number 7. I just can't make it go to waste. Now, as you can see, that's actually a leftover piece of the first card. I did try to create that first card with this pattern paper, but the flowers just didn't turn out well. And so I had to scrap this piece and use a different white piece of paper. And since the white piece is the one that I made a mistake, but the pattern part was still intact, I figured that I would use that as my background piece. And I am going to use my frame, and I'm just going to put that together. I know it's kind of weird to have two different frames, but I thought that they actually added a different look to this card by putting them together. Now, as you can see, they're kind of don't match really well, because when I cut it out, when I was cutting it out from card number 7, I wasn't really planning on using it, or, making sure that I cut that part perfectly so that I can reuse that. But it's all good, because I'm going to do the same technique that I did with card number 9, which is just to kind of cover up the seams with, well, not really what I do with card number 9, but I just decided to cover the seams with that flower. So I'm making sure that I lay that flower right where the seams are, so you wouldn't really see that. And at first I was thinking of doing the same thing that I did with card number 9, which is to put the sentiment on the center of it to cover the seams a little bit more. But I decided to actually trim the sentiment and cut them in 2, and then I'm going to put that on the top and the bottom, because as you can see, there's this space on the top that's just kind of empty within that frame, and I felt like that needed something there. And so that's what I'm going to do. And I cut that piece that says, "You encourage me to achieve my dreams," and I am going to add a few more enamel dots. Again, I'm running out of small ones here. I feel like the card, like if you put those big gigantic enamel dots, they're just too big. I did add a couple of the big ones just to use them up, but I will end up pulling from other enamel from my stash to use other enamel dots, because I just feel like 3 big ones is just too much for a small card base. And that's basically my card. I hope that you guys like these videos. If you do like these videos, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing. And again, if you have any questions, let me know in the description box below, and I will try to answer it as fast as I can. And also, if you're so inclined, give me some ideas of what themes that you would like me to tackle with any of my mini series, whether it's this 10 handmade cards or the other scrapbook mini series that I create for for my YouTube channel, because sometimes I kind of run out of ideas, or I want to be challenged by my audience. So let me know if you have any ideas. So I'm just showing you here what's left over from my kit. I do have a lot more of that pattern paper, which is a surprise because I was layering them, but I guess I wasn't using big pieces. I don't know, but I do have a few of the 6x6 that's left over, and I'm just going to put that back in my stash. And then here are just the stamp set, of course, tools, I just put them back in my stash, and a little review of the cards that I created. So here are some of them. Again, this "Thank You, You Make Me Smile for No Reason" is one of my favorites from the first batch. And then my second favorite, or my favorite from the second batch, would be the shaker card. Let me know in the description box below as well, which one of these are your favorite from the cards that I've created. Which one would you like? If you were to want to recreate any of the cards that I made, which one would you recreate as soon as you can? Now, this is the bonus that I was telling you about, is that I was able to create 2, 4, 6, 8, is it 11? 11 extra cards from this card set. I'm not kidding you. I was just like on a roll. And what I found was that if I cut out, or if I use these pattern paper scraps and just kind of lay them together, because again, the patterns are so small that you can mix them up, and I was able to create them, or I was able to create more cards with it. Now this last 3 are just card bases or card panels. They're not adhered to a card base, and I could just do that whenever I'm needing them. But those are my cards today, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you guys another day. Bye.